Thank you, Nikki, for organizing this whole thing and keeping everything running smoothly, even with the technology issues. So as Nikki just mentioned, we originally were intending on having our friend Tom Ellett from NYU join us. I'll just put everyone's information up on the screen for a second so that you can see it. And unfortunately, because of the rapidly changing situation in New York City, Tom needs to help support his staff and his students at this time. So he had to bail on us. But we are still really excited to have a fantastic conversation. I want to do quick introductions. My name is Zanti Ho. I'm the head of strategy at Convince and Convert. We are a digital marketing strategic consultancy. We are a completely virtual team, so we are based all over the US. So if you have any questions about working with teams from home, this is something that our team is extremely used to. And so I'm happy to make recommendations for tools, resources, et cetera, et cetera. We happen to work with many different kinds of organizations from the nonprofit side, the IMF, the UN, Eskenazi Museum, as well as many higher education organizations, the University of Arizona, ASU, Oregon State University, Indiana University, and many others. And so today I'm excited to specifically speak more in the higher ed space, which is why I've invited my wonderful guests. And joining us today is Jenna Richmond, who is the Director of Marketing and Communications actually at the University of Arizona's School of Science now, College of Science now, correct? But when we worked together previously, you were at the School of Behavioral
social and behavioral sciences.
Exactly. Thank you. It's such a long name. I always miss
really
a word. But I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, because again, you come from a very varied background and then have just been in the higher ed space the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Zanti. As you mentioned, I previously worked for the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at University of Arizona, and now I'm with the College of Science. So I hopped colleges. But my personal background is I've worked solely in advertising agencies, actually in the Phoenix market. So Adam Pierno, who was speaking before us, is actually an old colleague of mine. We worked together off Medicine Ave with your boss, the wonderful Jay Bear. And then he and I crossed paths again at a different agency. So I worked as a strategist and account person in my previous careers, working with really big firms or big clients like, DC Shoes and Zappos and CBS Television. I also worked with some higher ed with Thunderbird, School of Global Management, ASU, Duke, Clemson, and then also one of my clients that we did really great storytelling with was Cleveland Clinic. So I was able to kind of bring a lot of that varied background to higher education, which was something that I had previously worked on only on the agency side, not on the client side. So this is my first client side gig.
Great. Yeah, I actually think that it's so important to have both client side and agency side experience, because then you're really not only wearing both hats, but you really understand the challenges that you face on both sides. I think it makes you a more nuanced marketer for sure. Again, I just want to thank everybody for being here and being a part of this conversation. If you do have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in chat. I'm hoping that Nikki or ourselves, we can monitor for them and keep an eye on any questions that come up. Today's discussion is about leveraging student and alumni stories in social media. One of the reasons that we really wanted to focus on this is, as you guys have seen, in the last several years, social media has evolved so much. The people who are doing a great job of telling their stories are really able to differentiate their brands and really make their unique selling proposition obvious to people through demonstrating that their audience belongs to their tribe. I think that nowhere is this more important than in the higher education space, where belonging is such a big part of the value proposition that we put forward, not only to our students, but also our prospective students, our alumni, and our donors, right? And so as we have worked with many organizations, again, everyone from the alumni all the way through the prospective students in terms of who we're trying to speak to. I know that we constantly are talking about how can we make people more engaged and more desirous of being engaged. And I'd love to start there with you, Jenna.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the ways that you guys have used stories to help tell people why they should care about the messagings coming out of the various colleges at the University of Arizona?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about that. That's something that we've really focused on the past few years at U of A. And so one thing is we're currently a decentralized marketing team. So we have a central marketing team that is pretty lean and mean for the size of university that we are. And then each of the colleges have their own marketers. So you can understand that there's a lot of people saying different things out into the market, and students are really interested in the community of what the bigger university is going to bring them, as well as what those unique disciplines are. So what we're trying to do, and I would say that I think we're finally doing it with success and collaboration across campus, is really be telling these stories in a unique way. And so one of the number one things that we do with all freshmen coming through U of A, they all go through some sort of kind of orientation process. And we recently, the past few years, have been surveying the College of Science students and asking them what are some of their biggest concerns when joining as a freshman into this large university, that normally is bustling right now for spring semester and is quiet with the current circumstances. But one of the number one things that students say is the community aspect, that they're worried about making friends, they're worried about finding their tribe, they're nervous about that. And so it's really wonderful to be able to share stories and connect those stories to disciplines, to majors, and to how that they can actually be part of a community. And so recently the University of Arizona launched a campaign surrounding the theme of wonder, and they worked with a large agency in LA, and they kind of came up with this entire wonder theme, and it's all about telling stories. So it's all about understanding what is that drive that brings people to the University of Arizona to do research or to study or to collaborate with other individuals, because we are a Research One school. And so recently, as of yesterday, we just got some new rankings for US News and World Report, and one of which is always an exciting day, but one of our departments has been top 10 ranked for over 30 years, and that's quite a feat. And that's the speech, language, and hearing department in the College of Science, which is a very interesting department. They do clinical research as well as non-clinical based research. And what Central had actually done was highlighted a story with one of their grad students. And so yesterday, when we were announcing these new rankings and really, congratulating the hard work of that department, we were able to do so by showcasing one of the grad students' stories and linking it back to the general University of Arizona homepage, as well as the College of Science. And so it's a really nice way to push that out on social media. And it's something that we learned working together with our Convince and Convert friends, which was we already had this nice piece that had been written by the central marketing team. So why recreate the wheel? So what we wanted to do was really showcase that, have some continuity and some consistency, and then break that into smaller pieces that we shared out on social media. And we're going to be amplifying those in the coming weeks to share that student story and how she found her community and what she was interested in doing. So that's one way that we've been telling stories, but there's so many different facets of people to touch at the university level.
Absolutely. And within social media, when you guys are thinking about the different audiences that you're trying to reach through this kind of communication of individual stories, individual examples of the work that's being accomplished and the journeys that people are actually experiencing, who are you trying to speak to on your different channels? So if we think about your different social media channels, are there different audiences? How do you make sure that you're speaking to people in the ways that are most relevant to them?
think one of our connections got a little spotty there for a second.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So, as you're thinking about your different social media channels, how do you
Mhm.
differentiate how each one serves its audience, and who are the audiences that you're trying to tap into in each one?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was something that we really thought a lot about when I was with the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And so I've kind of brought that methodology over to the College of Science, because the College of Science is actually the largest undergraduate college at the University of Arizona. It serves over 7,000 students. So, I mean, it's like the size of a small college in itself. But one thing that the College of Science was really lacking before I joined was they didn't really have a marketing team. They had some people doing marketing really disparately, and they were using a different outside firm that they really wanted to kind of be, have their own branding rather than vibing with the University of Arizona branding, which as a Wildcat alumni, I love the U of A brand and I want it to be, consistent across all of the colleges. And one thing that they weren't really doing actively was social media. So they really kind of utilized it once a year when we have a really, really well-known lecture series that everybody loves. And that's when they were really tapping into it. So I was kind of starting at like a foundation level, and I realized that people were following the Twitter because they really wanted, following us on Twitter because they really wanted those articles, that deep, we have so many fans of science out there and faculty across the country who are looking at it, and other influencers. And that really seemed to be, who we were reaching on Twitter. When it came to Facebook, Facebook is a really interesting demographic right now. We were really seem to be reaching our community. So Tucson is a really rich community. We have a lot of people that live here, partially, and they love the community aspects that we do. So all of the different events and the different things that we offer for free, like the lecture series, really seem to be boosted and do really well organically on Facebook. Our students are growing, especially now with the coronavirus and COVID-19 kind of epidemic that's happening. The students have been increasing on our Instagram week over week because we've been putting up information on our stories. We've been sharing information there. And so that's really been powerful to see. But we also seem to see students really wanting to interact more on Instagram. So we kind of look at our students there, and then our Facebook really tends to be our own community, our College of Science staff and faculty, as well as the Tucson community who's kind of looking for things to do and, looking to the college as experts. And Twitter is really a great way to kind of showcase some of our expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share some examples from some different schools of campaigns that they're doing
Mhm.
that sort of relate to what you're talking about. And
Sure.
I, of course, have an example that you sent me as well. I think that you bring up a good point that understanding how your audiences communicate is so important, right? Making sure that you're using the channels that they use in the ways that they want to use them is a really
Yeah.
important part of the storytelling, that the medium is the message, as Marshall McLuhan would say, right? So for students, I think, as you mentioned, Instagram stories is such a powerful way to communicate with them because it's a regular way that they're getting instantaneous,
Mhm.
timely information. I think that's really relevant. Now, obviously, this is an example from one of our clients that is from a more lighthearted time, but you can see that this is a choose your own adventure campaign that they did on Instagram stories for IU Day, which is their main fundraising day that we worked with them to start several years ago. And one of the things that you can see with this particular campaign that I think is really effective is that they're using the nature of the medium, right? They
Mhm.
had this kind of ongoing series of different video clips that would prompt people to take the poll, which next place do you want to explore with us? And then once they got enough responses, then they would shoot the next one. So they really adapted the storytelling of IU Day through the medium of Instagram stories. Another example that I think is really great when it comes to thinking about the media that we actually use is from our other original panelist, Tom Ellett over at NYU. And Tom is the assistant SVP of Student Affairs, and one of the main areas that it falls under his purview is resident assistance. So all of the students who are overseeing the residence halls on campus, NYU has tens of thousands of residential students, more than most schools. And one thing that really keeps their community thriving is the student leaders who are overseeing that population. And one thing that he's developed with his team is this great podcast that pairs alumni who were resident assistants with current resident assistants to have a conversation and then do that as an ongoing series. And I happen to have been on the show because I was an RA at NYU, and Tom was a very new hire when I was at NYU 15 years ago. But at the time, you know, one of the things that we saw immediately was how strongly they created this sense of community among this student leader group. And then now leveraging that alumni community actually really helps them to activate those alumni to stay involved. By reaching out to these people who are a built-in part of a community that's already highly involved, they actually are getting these people to mentor their current students, engage further with their students as people who come out for activities, but also they know that the RAs are already amplifiers of content, so they're actually more likely to push this content out in their own social media to share with people. So I think that's another great example of how you can think about using media that really applies specifically to a community and speaks to that community's needs. I'd love to also look at this example from you, Jenna, from the College of Science, which is an example of a story that focuses on a professor. Could you tell us a little bit about this campaign and what you guys were trying to achieve here?
Yeah, and I really love this campaign. I was able to meet this young professor at the College of Science does a monthly board advisory meeting, and they invite a professor to come in, excuse me, and speak at it. And I was able to meet her, and she had so much passion and so much drive for her students. And she was telling me about this really interesting weekly lecture that she does for free and fully in Spanish. And obviously in the Tucson community, we are a Hispanic serving institute, and you know, it's very prevalent in our community and in our culture. And she does a lecture series of astronomy once a week in Spanish. And she told me it's really popular, but she wasn't quite sure how to amplify it. And so I said, we'd love to help you. And so we were able to connect this story on our homepage. And then what we really were featuring in the content that we were pushing out through social media was this exact byline that she was, you know, so interested in our student success, but also that there was this, you know, kind of learning experience that people could go for free and partake in. And she saw a lovely increase in her following on, you know, of that lecture. And like you said, she was really excited to share it personally. And that was something that I thought was really interesting. And when I was previously at the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, something we did, it kind of spurred in my brain when you were talking about the RA series with NYU, was we actually connected students with advisors to talk about their majors, because there's so many offerings within the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. There's over 30 majors, and that can be really overwhelming. But there's also a lot of really traditional liberal arts majors within that college. And so sometimes students felt like they had to defend, you know, to be able to tell, you know, Uncle Jerry at Thanksgiving that it is a good idea to have an English degree. And so what we did was we actually paired these advisors and these individuals from their majors to talk about the journey of a student and how advisors can help and what advisors can be, what that person can be to the student. And it really was this like lovely conversation in this podcast called Major Steps. And then by sharing it out through different social medias, everyone was so excited to share it. The student was excited to share it. The advisor was excited to share it. And it was really able to like get more legs and build that social media web, which was really exciting. And we saw an increase in interest in those majors through RFI forms during that phase, which was great.
Well, I love that you're talking about the power of acknowledging people's concerns as well, because I think that's a really big part of what we can actually do through storytelling, that the content that we're creating, the value that it provides is actually to alleviate some of those fears, concerns, challenges, barriers, so that our prospective students are more likely to come into the school, or our alumni are more willing to continue to engage. I actually want to show an example from ASU, which I think is a great series that helps do some of that storytelling. They have both this campus tour series as well as this move-in series. And let me scroll back up here, the You Asked series, that I think are all really great examples of how we can use storytelling from the points of views of our students and our actual the people who really live on campus to talk about what it's actually like. You mentioned earlier about how you connected with that professor, and I think that's a great segue to talk a little bit about how do you find people within your community who are going to be those great representatives, to be those great storytellers, and to, speak eloquently about the challenges that are out there on campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I felt a little naive when I first joined the university setting because I thought people would be pounding on my door to tell their story, and it's really not the case. So I'm really lucky that centrally with the University of Arizona, our marketing and brand management team and our communications team do a wonderful job of going out and finding the faculty to share those stories. We are, as I had mentioned before, a Research One school, so it's really important for many different levels to be sharing those different stories about the research, but it's more difficult to find the student stories. I'm an advisor for one of the larger sororities on campus, and so I tap into them to find friends and things like that. That was one of my first ways of doing it. But what I really have been able to do is I try to listen as much as possible when I'm out on campus, attending different events, and really just going up to people afterwards and saying, hey, that was really inspirational. Or you mentioned this professor, what was that person's name again? And when I've been able to do kind of one-to-one reach out, it seems like that's been really successful. But we are currently creating, because our central communications team can only handle so much that they do. And so what we've been doing is we are working within the College of Science to kind of create a process for where people can say, hey, Central wasn't going to, we liked this story, but Central wasn't really interested in doing it. What are you interested in doing it? So my team could do some like smaller parsing out of it. I stumbled upon the advisors and realized what a nugget they were at the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences through just their wonderful team invited me in when I first joined to meet them. And I saw how passionate they were. And I said, this group is definitely a group to tap. Within the College of Science, I'm really interested in working with our college ambassadors who are very young, interested, very committed, very, involved on campus. And that was really helpful, specifically with the College of Science kids. A lot of them are first generation. It's a large university. Some are definitely more introverted. And so being able to find their community is really important. And that's something I'm really interested in doing. And so through working with our student advisors and as well as my associate dean of research, he's Professor Pete Reiner. He's a really interesting guy, and he's really interested in pushing undergraduate research for our students because that's really unique at the U of A.
That's great. And you mentioned that you luckily have a lot of support from the different disparate parts of your marketing apparatus, but what are some challenges you've faced internally, and what advice do you have for people as they face some of these same challenges within their own organization?
Yeah, so I was lucky when I walked into the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, they already had a team. It was me, and it was a graphic designer and a writer I was really lucky. She's been there for, at that time, 15 years and just had so much institutional knowledge. And then our team grew through joining with videographers and photographers. So we were a pretty amazing team. We had a content expert. And now when I joined over at the College of Science, it's just me and my graphic designer. So that's definitely a challenge, is that it's just the two of us. It's a very large college. Each of the units have their own needs. They're very different needs. Everyone has different requests and different goals in mind. One thing that I think has been a huge challenge for the College of Science is we just don't even have basic foundational, a baseline to go from, because there really wasn't a marketing team in place. And so what I did was really, peel back the layers of the onion to just say, okay, like, let's start at our basics and let's get a solid marketing plan put together. And let's understand, baby steps of what we need to do to build our foundation and get some good stories, and then move forward so that we can kind of grow. One thing that has been really helpful was creating a marketing plan that was digestible to my senior leader. I report directly to the interim dean, who doesn't have a background. He's a physicist. He doesn't really have a background in marketing. So being able to showcase what the return on investment would be from providing, whether it's me working with people like Convince and Convert, or, hiring, and what would that look like, and how is that going to help the College of Science meet our strategic goals along with the University of Arizona's goals. So I think getting that buy-in from up above is a really big thing. And then the other thing that I think has really helped, at least in my experience, is there sometimes is a lack of process. And when I say process, it's from using technology as our friend. And, as you said, I've worked virtually for lots of companies in the past. And so I was really used to being kind of lean and mean and working on virtual. And so we actually use monday.com, and we set up our processes there. So if you have a marketing request, it goes in through a form. We, monitor that every day, and it goes through a whole entire process. Even though it's just me and one other person, it makes sure that nothing slips through the cracks. And we also, with moving virtually, the College of Science dean staff, we've been, everyone's been kind of asked to move off campus. I got everybody on board with Slack, which no one really wanted to use before. So I feel like that's been a little, silver lining win, is having those processes. So I would say that from a challenging standpoint, it's trying to get people on the same page, and then how to connect in a thoughtful way, but using technology, I think, to your advantage, is something that I found really helped me be successful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that you bring up a great point about proving that return on investment, right? One of the reasons that I think that this topic, leveraging stories and using them through the digital medium, was really important to me is that oftentimes people can come to the table if they're not marketers and say, oh, story sounds kind of touchy-feely. Like, how does this actually help us bring in prospective students? How does this help us, retain students? How does this help us retain alumni? But the truth is that storytelling is a tool in your arsenal that helps you to answer those core questions, to really reach people in the ways that is actually persuasive to them, right? That we don't make decisions only based on information. We make a lot of decisions based on our emotional connection to organizations. So making sure that we're able to use the storytelling as a tool to reach people is a conversation that you absolutely have to have as a baseline with your own organization, so they understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something that we created at the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences that's actually moving now campus wide, that I feel was a huge win for our team, was we created major landing pages. So all of our videos telling stories, the podcasts, the different social medias, we're all linking back to these really thoughtful landing pages that were more talking to the emotional side, with really nice nuggets of content, and then an RFI form. So if students were interested in learning more, they were given that kind of emotional, uplifting podcast or YouTube video or whatnot, and then we're able to actually say, hey, I really want to know more about that. And we saw a huge increase in requests, and so that immediately made everybody pretty excited.
Well, with our last minute, Jenna, I want to just thank you again for being a part of this panel. It's so valuable. Could you tell us where we can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find our social media handles at science.arizona.edu, and we are readily available on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook through UArizona Science.
Wonderful. And you can find me at Zonti Ho on most platforms, and we are at Convince on Twitter and convinceandconvert.com for many, many more articles, not only in the higher ed space, but again, serving many other verticals, including finance, tech, MarTech, and healthcare as well. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Nikki, for having us, and we look forward to seeing the rest of the panels today.